fucking tell me. Like give it to me direct.
If I don't have ADHD, this is going to actually be quite disappointing.
Okay, I need to slow the fuck down.
Obviously, as sisters, we grew up in the same house. We both had very different experiences. I very much had a belief that dad did not like me, that he like much preferred you.
That's the thing that pushed me to a nervous system breakdown.
It's going to feel raw and rough, and the exhaustion is so fucking real. I am a 34-year-old woman. It's embarrassing that my partner's having to remind me to eat good. If they don't like you, then they are not the long-term partner that you need in life. Looking back, do you wish that you had been diagnosed earlier? Hey, you absolute cutie. Welcome back. I'm Hannah, your host, and this is Too Much, Not Enough, the podcast where we stop shrinking, start trusting, and reclaim every messy, magical part of who we are. Before we dive into today's episode, I'm going to be a little bit cheeky and ask you for something. If you're not already, can you please give us a follow? And even better, rate or leave us a review? I know your time is so precious, and I wouldn't be asking if it didn't make a huge difference. I want to keep having these awesome, deep, soul-shaking conversations with you. Okay, let's get into the episode. I am actually so excited about this one. I probably say that at the beginning of every episode, but this one is very, very near and dear to my heart. Number one, because my sister's here today. Say hi, Bex.
Hi.
And number two, because we are going to be talking about something that we have both gone through recently, and that is late diagnosed ADHD and the absolute wild trip that is unmasking in your 30s. Mm-hmm. And what I think is going to be so interesting about this conversation is that obviously as sisters, we grew up in the same house, same parents, same environment. We both had very different experiences as it relates to our ADHD, our masking, and then come to now our unmasking. So yeah, I'm just really excited to have you here to chat about this today.
Me too.
So there was kind of a waterfall of diagnoses in our family in the past 3-4 years. Yeah. It started off with dad, and then me, and then you. And I think it's kind of funny now looking back because we always knew our family was different. Mm-hmm. Like that was not something we were unaware of. We were a bit weird, a bit quirky. We attracted people specifically because we were like that and probably repelled a whole bunch of others because of it. Yeah. But like, I think we kind of always chalked that up to the fact that like mom and dad are English. They grew up there. Like,
exactly. Like we grew up, like we were born in Europe. We moved to Canada and it was like, yeah, it really was that, you know, we kind of thought there was a cultural difference or something, even though, you know, on the surface, like Canada and England aren't that different. It just was this, we were doing things differently. We ate dinner at different times. Yeah. Like dad's humor was different. Mm-hmm. Well, all of our humor was different, but particularly dad's, like very sarcastic, very dry. And like for some people that was kind of off-putting.
Yeah, totally. Like, you know, mom going around at parties, like kind of after dad apologizing to people who looked like shocked and appalled at some of the things he may have said. And it's just like, I love the British humor. I do love that dry sarcasm, but maybe it was like at a different level.
Yeah, there was like something extra. And that's not to underestimate. Like there are cultural differences for sure. And I think that was an element to it. And plus, like mom and dad did things a little bit differently. Like they moved around a lot. It wasn't just their background in the UK. It was like, you know, France and Belgium and all of that. True. So that was a part of it. But I think now we know what we know about our sort of neurodivergent family. We're like, oh, that probably also contributed to the difference.
For sure. And like anyone listening to this who knows us, maybe being like, yeah, fucking duh. Like, of course you're a neurodivergent family. And now we also think that. Like,
Right.
we're like, this makes so much sense. But until like the penny dropped and it was confirmed for dad first, it just wasn't on our radar.
It wasn't at all. And like, it's crazy to think now because dad, like, now we know what we know. The fact that none of us even had an inkling that dad had ADHD, it's so obvious now.
He checks every single box,
Yeah.
basically. It's like, I don't really remember. My brain has sort of erased the time that we didn't know, or it's like
Yeah.
filled in the gaps of not knowing. Because now I'm just like, yeah, of course, that's how he was his whole life.
Exactly. And to be fair, it's like there were kind of structures holding that up. And I think, you know, dad was masking for a good chunk of his life when he was still working and all of that sort of stuff, which is why it became so obvious when like those guardrails came down during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Like it just became so obvious at that time.
I think like a lot of people, there was a slowing down in during the pandemic. There was a shift in routines. There was a removal of perhaps supports that were in place that people didn't even know they had put in place. And a lot of people spent a lot more time together, like our parents, which sort of was what prompted mom to follow this thread.
Yeah.
And encourage dad to get, diagnosed.
Yeah.
Which from there led to her realizing, I guess, in her research, how genetic neurodivergence is, how genetic ADHD is, and how likely it is that your children have it. Yeah. I can't remember the percentage, but it's very high.
It's very high, yeah.
And so then mom brought it up to me first. We were going for a hike and I was sitting in the back of their car and I was going through a pretty tough time, kind of picking up the pieces, for my breakdown, which I talk about in the first episode. And mom was like, have you ever considered that you might have ADHD? And of course, like I was feeling, even though I was 30 something in the back of the car, like, oh yeah, mom, whatever. Like you're obsessed with ADHD now because dad has it. Like, yeah. I'm like, okay, but like probably not, but sure, mom. Yeah, I'll look into that. Then turns out she was very right. And I got diagnosed a year or two after dad, and it made a lot of sense once I understood the like wider breadth of how ADHD presents.
Yeah.
Because I very much had in my mind, which I think a lot of people do, it's changing for sure, but this picture of like the rowdy boy in the classroom who can't sit down and keeps interrupting.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the understanding until, of course, Instagram and TikTok came along and became this like absolute wellspring of knowledge for ADHD, that it can present very differently, and especially in women.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I remember too, and it's just funny how the like ripple effect, and also just the, I feel like even when I started talking to dad about it, he was in denial at first too. He was like, I don't have that. Yeah. Like, and it took him a little while to like come around to the idea that actually, in fact, he did. And then same for you. It was like this, like, what? Like, that doesn't sound like me. But then you learn more and then you're just like, okay, I know actually that ticks a lot of boxes. Yeah. But then similarly too, and I think this is where it's just like continuing to evolve, is like, the way what you just mentioned about it, like presents very differently in, girls versus boys, men versus women. But even when you started going through the journey and I was learning more about how it presents in women, I was looking at it and being like, yeah, that all checks out for Hannah, but I didn't feel like it resonated for me. So it was continued to not be on my radar that was me at all. And so even to the point of like, as things have progressed and we now know how it presents or typically presents in girls, I am like, that still didn't quite land with me. Those like classic traits for women didn't land with me. And it wasn't until I started learning a little bit more to start understanding what it meant for me, essentially. Yeah.
And those classic traits in women, like, because the thing is, I think growing up, girls are very socialized to like, be good, be quiet, stay still, that whole kind of outdated concept of be seen and not heard. And so in the classroom, yes, of course, there were girls who were hyperactive and, kind of running around the classroom and interrupting. But there's also a more internalized experience of ADHD that a lot of women experience. But that I think has led to this like tsunami of late diagnoses that women really fell through the cracks in a big way because there were just other protection mechanisms and maybe like a stronger need to mask. Potentially. And so, when I found out, mom prompted me, I did some more research and then was like, okay, I think I'm going to get diagnosed and see if what I think this is what it is.
Yeah.
And for me, getting diagnosed was like a relief. Mm-hmm. Like I always knew that there was something different about me, that there was just something a bit off, for lack of better word. I don't look at it like that anymore, but there was just something that felt like, I don't think this should all be so difficult. Mm. And, when I was little, pretty much every one of my report cards said, Hannah talks too much. From, elementary school, high school, like this was a recurring theme. I would have conflict with friends a lot, just a little bit of an outsider. And again, chalking this up to, we grew up in a suburb. When we first got to our school, we both had English accents. Mm-hmm. And it was like this big deal. Kids would come up to me in the playground and be like, say this word or say that word. It was like, we were a bit on show. And so there was this understanding that we were like the different kids. Yeah. But once I got diagnosed, I was like, oh, this explains so much, to the point where before, as I was going into the diagnosis, I was like, if I don't have ADHD, this is going to actually be quite disappointing. Right. Because then why am I like this kind of thing? Right. So for me, the diagnosis, like I said, was this kind of relief of just, okay, I finally have an answer for why these pieces just didn't fit all this time in my life. And for maybe why I'm so fucking exhausted all the time. Mm-hmm. But for you, it was a very different experience getting diagnosed, right? Yeah.
And I mean, again, as I was starting to understand ADHD more through your lens, and I was sort of like almost educating myself on it to understand you better or something. And then that I was sort of understanding how all those things came together. But then I think there was just some other moments. And again, like mom being just like the ADHD kind of puppeteer in our family, like she'd made some comments, like I had, similarly was going through sort of a difficult time and was like continuously just sort of like burnt out and everything was just sort of like, my nervous system was like crashing. Mm-hmm. And I was exploring lots of different things. Like, I was going to therapy and then I was like really battling with the idea of like going on, antidepressants, anti-anxiety, that sort of thing, which is something I had never considered before. Yeah. And as I was going through that process, I remember mom sort of, being like, well, when you're talking to your doctor, like, you should let them know that your dad and your sister have ADHD. And again, because I just it was so completely not on my radar, I was like, well, why would I say that? Like, well, sure. Like,
but it just feels kind of,
but it's not weird. Relevant or something. And even to the point that like, I went to my doctor and I said, I'm like, well, my mom said I should say this, like, and it's like, I'm a 33-year-old woman, like, and I'm still in the doctor's office being like, my mom told me this, but I even said, I was like, well, my mom said I should mention it, but I don't think I do have ADHD. So, let's just deal with the issue at hand here, issues, which is what I thought to be anxiety and depression and all of that. But then, I continued going down that road, but then there was just more instances where, mom was mentioning things about it and sort of saying, well, you should look into this to do with ADHD. And then there was a few moments even where you started being like, I'd be expressing something I was finding challenging and you would be like, oh, well, like that's an ADHD trait and that's an ADHD trait. And I remember like just like very vividly us like all standing around the island at Christmas that year. I was like, do you all think I have ADHD and you're just you don't know how to say it, which like, again, now too, it's sort of like, just freaking tell me, like, like give it to me direct. And you all were just like, we think maybe. Yeah. And as we started chatting about it, I was just like, I would be mind blown if I had ADHD at that time. Yeah. I was so far from understanding what it was or believing that I would even be close to having it, that I was just like, sure, I'll go through the motions, but I don't think I have that. Yeah. But then naturally, as I do on things that sort of spark interest, like I did like a massive deep dive. And it wasn't until I started reading and learning about masking that the penny dropped. Like the ADHD traits were still maybe not fully resonating with me. And then when I got to masking, I was like, fuck.
This is written about me.
Yeah. Like this is me on a piece of paper. Like I do every single one of these things. And that's where it just like, I was like, okay.
Which is so wild because, again, masking is such a huge part of being neurodivergent in this society and like trying to exist in structures like school and work that are not built with neurodivergent people in mind. Not built with a lot of different people in mind, but obviously today we're talking specifically about neurodivergency and in the fact that you couldn't connect to the ADHD traits, but that you were like, oh my God, I've been masking my whole life once you understood what masking was, just speaks to how not only prevalent it is, but how intense masking can be from the perspective of like you becoming someone you are not essentially. Yeah. On not every level. Obviously, you are still you. It's not like you unmasked once you found out you had ADHD and you're a completely different person, but just from the perspective of like you couldn't even resonate or relate to ADHD because you were so hyper masked.
Yeah.
And this goes back to a conversation that we've had previously about how we kind of masked differently growing up.
Yeah.
Like that we kind of each went a different route in masking, which you brought up to me the other day. And I was like, oh my gosh, you nailed it. That's exactly what happened in our family. Because remember, we didn't know we were neurodivergent growing up. We were just trying to survive, as we all are as humans. And so mom and dad put in a lot of things and systems and learnings and all that to kind of help us, you know, dad put them in innately to help him succeed. And then mom put them in to help dad succeed, I guess. And then they both put them in to help their daughters kind of make it. And so there was a lot of structure in the house growing up, but I kind of rejected that structure in the sense that like, I identified more with being like messy and a little like type B, let's call it, like not wanting to do everything kind of like perfectly into the letter of the law, but watching especially dad be like very intense about doing things right and clean and this and that. And there is a right way to do something and a wrong way to do something. I desperately wanted approval. And so I tried to do it, but always felt like I came up short. I was always so self-conscious that I could never quite get it right, or that like I was never as good as Becca or dad at doing things. Yeah. Whereas for you,
well, I like literally just mimicked everything that dad did, you know, and I can see it's like we became like a carbon copy of each other to the point that I was also like kind of praised for it too. And I don't remember this obviously from my childhood,
like
but
a conscious decision.
No, but it's like once I kind of looked back on it, I was like, oh yeah, like I just like became dad, like everything that he did. And, you know, like I don't even think that I've acknowledged this fully until maybe right now, is that like dad's masking, he masked so hard that then I copied that. And that's like, the masking is what I struggled with. I don't even really know what I struggled with growing up from an ADHD perspective. I truly believe that my challenges in relation to ADHD all come from masking. Like that's the thing that pushed me to a nervous system breakdown was me masking and overcompensating.
Because as a kid, you were kind of messy. Like,
Yeah.
I remember you'd like come in from the park and you'd have like your pockets full of things, just garbage, essentially.
Literally garbage that I called like collections.
Yeah, that were
and
things
like
you loved collecting stuff, which is a quite obvious neurodivergent trait now that we look at it. But you were like a little rough around the edges, a little tomboy,
Yeah.
for, lack of a better word. Like that picture, I think you have it in your bedroom that I love, of you like we're camping and you're standing around a fire with goggles on and just like you've
Like
got
just
swords in
I
your
don't
hands.
know,
Something. I don't know what it
sticks or
sticks
something,
in your
and like
hand.
yeah,
That's what I remember you as a kid, just like carefree and like rough, not rough and tumble, but just like get in it and have fun and not worried about other people like at all. And then again, I can't put my finger on when that shifted,
but at some stage.
but at some stage very much shifted and you became this like very put together, very in control, hyper like controlling of everything that was kind of happening, and like the person who got shit done, organized stuff, like planned the itineraries on trips and always got your friends together. In our family, up until recently, like I was the mental health girl. I was known as the emotional one of the two of us, and you were very much known as the like the buttoned up. If you were struggling with something, you were dealing with it internally and then coming to us after to be like, just FYI, this is what happened, but I'm good now. And so when you moved back from London and like kind of just after me, because like you love to copy everything I do, had your own sort of nervous system collapse breakdown, and you were talking about feeling depressed and anxiety, and that like you actually didn't know what you had been feeling all this time along was even anxiety. I remember being like, whoa, this is weird.
Yeah.
Because like I'm so familiar with this territory personally, but I'm so unfamiliar with my sister experiencing this territory, which is kind of actually crazy for me to think now, because of course you're a human being, of course you experience anxiety and depression, but I just like I didn't associate that with you.
Well, I think I had like just such a strong wall up. It's interesting because like I now look at it as I'm like, oh, I had this like armor on.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that I wasn't like a open person. Like I was still very open.
True.
I still talked about my feelings. I still, was an approachable person for people to come to talk through things and things like that. So it's still kind of confusing to me, but it's almost like there was this invisible armor, like for me internally, that was not even allowing me to go there. And then as some things got stripped away, it's like I can really pinpoint that like the moment I started working from home was the moment that things started crumbling for me. And obviously there was a good, 4 years between when that started and when I got diagnosed with ADHD. Like it's like things started crumbling and I started, subconsciously even like picking up on the things that I was struggling with, like the over planning, always being the one who's okay, like just all these things that I was just like, it was just breaking down. And so it's interesting now to like look back on it, and obviously then like the end moment being me getting diagnosed with ADHD, that I'm just like, okay, well now that all makes sense.
It's funny also you say that about kind of the maybe pivot point was starting to work from home.
Yeah.
Because for me, I started working from home like 2 years before the pandemic, because I quit my job and started working for myself.
Yeah.
And I very much at that time struggled.
Yeah.
Like big time of not being in the structure of an office environment with the like accountability of a team. And I had to get up and self-motivate every day and sit down on my computer and, do my to-do list. And I went through like a whole self-reckoning kind of moment when I started working from home. And I chalked that up to like, that's entrepreneurship. That's what taking a leap, and betting on yourself involves, and that like you have to kind of create this new system to work around. But now looking back, that was kind of the point for me too, because what's interesting is that I always maintained that I started unmasking before I even knew I had ADHD.
Yes.
For multiple reasons. One, I think because now I'm realizing that moment right there that I started working from home like a couple years before the pandemic, but also because in 2021, I had like a huge breakdown and my body basically, like, I had used and abused it and ignored all of its signals, and I could not, it was not an option to continue how I was continuing. So I started just looking at like, okay, where in my life am I misaligned? Where in my life am I presenting a version of me that is not me and that is slowly chipping away at my soul? And I started unmasking, then got my diagnosis and was like, well, I've kind of already, like, don't get me wrong, there was definitely more to do after that, but I'm already on this kind of train. The train's already left the station.
And for me, I think same thing. There was some unknown unmasking that I was doing, or maybe not even unmasking, but kind of just starting rejecting certain things where I was like, I don't want to be the planner anymore. I was like really resentful of like people expecting me to do that. I was like, it started really, really frustrating me. And it's like, fair enough, they expected it. I built an entire personality around it. But it started to really irk me because it was like I had just planned and controlled and overexerted myself to a point that I couldn't keep up with it anymore.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, like, it was kind of a relief for me when you like step back a little bit from that, like, controlling, like hyper planning, got everything for multiple reasons. Selfishly, because it was like, oh, yeah, I'm not the only messy one here, like trying to pretend like I'm not, like, you know, Becca was also kind of pretending, but also growing up, like, because you were so like dad and like you said, kind of is like mini me. I very much had a belief that dad did not like me, that he like much preferred you, and that like he just like, you know, obviously he loved me. I was his daughter, nothing like that, but that he just didn't really like me. He didn't connect with me. And maybe it's because he could see the messiness, or maybe it's because, you know, mom's messiness would frustrate him, because same thing, he was like trying to stay so in control. And so I would watch that and be like, ooh, well, I'm going to get rejected in the same way if I'm like that, but I kind of really want to be like mom. And so then there was a little bit of an element of like, you know, that was more so, that feeling was more strong in my teens and early 20s. I wouldn't say so much more recently. But again, when you started kind of letting go of these things, I was like, yeah, like, okay, cool. Like, we've always had a close relationship. Sometimes it struggled more than others, and we've definitely butted heads. And we have certainly learned over the years how to be less passive aggressive towards each other. But there was just this something that as you unmasked, that I was like, oh no, we're kind of the same. And that naturally like creates a different kind of connection. I think a more natural connection. Because we were neither of us were kind of pretending anymore. And both of us got a little bit more like direct with each other, or we've learned how to become more direct with each other. Because like our family could take home awards with how we were passive aggressive before. And again, I think that really layers into this, like, we were masking, we didn't really know who we were. And then when you mask, because really anyone masks, like, this is not something that is only for neurodivergent people. It just happens that it's super intense.
Well, yes. And I think that is actually the key, because you're right. Everyone masks to a degree, like, especially in certain situations,
like work, for example,
or like social gatherings or something, like whatever that is. But I think you're right that it's like, it's the degree at which you mask and the energy it takes for you to mask. Like that's the challenge, because it takes so much out of a neurodivergent person to mask,
to pretend that are
it's
normal.
Like, it's just like so depleting, really.
Yes.
And again, like, it's like over time, if you're doing that for such a long time and so intensely, I think for both of us, like, clearly in slightly different scenarios, like, our body finally said, like, enough. You know, I didn't make the conscious choice to try to start living my life differently. Like, my body kind of made the choice for me. It was like, you can't do this anymore. Like, and it like, I physically, I had no other choice but to change something. And I think that the big thing for me, again, and this was all before I even knew I had ADHD because my body broke down before that, was just like, okay, I need to slow the fuck down. And I think that that's a big thing of just the pace and the perfectionism and giving 150% to everything.
Because that's how we learned to be accepted, to be worthy, because we got feedback growing up that if you over exert yourself, then you're going to get praise, and that is a good thing. It really is such a system of unlearning and remembering who you are at the core, and that like who you are at the core is beautiful and okay. And in fact, you possess, as someone with ADHD, like the ability to see things in a way that neurotypicals can, and vice versa. Neurotypicals can do and see things in a way that we can't. Both are so necessary. But because our structures in society are so geared towards neurotypicals, a lot of those beautiful things are seen as wrong, or a lot of the not so desirable, let's say, traits like being late, which is something that I struggled with my entire life, is not seen as a desirable trait as an employee, for example. And so there's so much shame that comes in about that, right? Like, or the fact that getting straight down to the point and being blunt and no fluff and no small talk. Well, networking business is all about fucking small talk. And then the thought of doing that makes my skin crawl. But then I'm like, but I'm an entrepreneur. I have to deal with it.
Right.
But that's, it's not true. But again, these systems just keep telling us well, this is the way to be successful. If you don't fit into that, then you might as well pretend, because otherwise you won't be successful. There was no conscious moment where we started masking. It's not I can draw it back to this happened in the playground and then I was different after that. There was just seeing what got other people accepted or success and what didn't, and then course correcting towards that. I even remember growing up, if I saw a person I liked, or I saw a person who was popular, or that people reacted well to, even subconsciously, I would start copying their mannerisms. And I realized that was a masking thing. Being this person seems to be cool. Maybe I could be a bit more like them.
Right. And I did that too. And I remember knowing it at the time as well, but I just thought it's I'm spending so much time with this person. That's why I'm doing it.
Yes. I was aware of it. But not aware of why I was doing it. Yeah.
I actually had a funny conversation with a friend. I think it was in relation to what we were looking for in a partner. And we were just we want someone who's that they can do it all like we can. They can adapt to all the different situations. We can be this. We fit in with the cool crowd. We fit in with the misfits. We fit in with this. We fit in with that. And we're just we want someone who can also do that. And now when I look back at that, I continuously think about it. So I was well, fuck, we were fucking masking. We were just adapting to everyone else.
I think getting diagnosed was so important, not because I now have a label, but because it just gave me another viewpoint of why I do certain things, and gave me a moment to say, am I doing that because I like it and because it's good? Or am I doing that because it's protected me or, helped me been accepted, and it's actually exhausting? Because something you mentioned earlier is masking is exhausting, and especially neurodivergence masking, the energy it takes to do that. When I hit full on burnout and my breakdown, I honestly think it's been years that it's taken me to get back to an energy level that feels a bit more consistent. And so that exhaustion is very real, and it is a process to kind of recalibrate and build back trust with yourself and your system. Also a lot of self-love and self-compassion that has to come in with the parts of you that you have constantly told yourself are wrong, hidden away in such an extreme way. There was a lot of self-hatred and self-loathing in my past. And that's not an easy thing to just be okay, I have ADHD. Now I'm going to be different.
Right.
Now I'm going to unmask. Like,
But I think there is like that giving yourself kind of grace or something was a massive positive of coming out of a diagnosis. I actually remember because I got diagnosed like 1 or 2 months maybe before I started a new job. I remember actually like very, vividly that like when I was starting the new job, obviously like it's natural to feel like super overwhelmed at the start.
yeah.
But knowing like that, even just like with the little knowledge I had about ADHD and getting diagnosed, it just allowed me to give myself grace. I think in previously when I started a new job, for example, I would have like gotten really down on myself and I would have been like, well, I want to know this stuff now. And like, I want to fast forward to the point that I know it all. And I should know this, I should know that or whatever. Whereas this time I could be like, this is all very confusing and overwhelming. It's exaggerated because my brain is kind of like, struggling to keep up or playing tricks on me or whatever. And it just allowed me to be like, okay, that's like the reality and just like give myself grace and like kind of almost like talk myself off a ledge of like, I'm not supposed to ever understand everything right now. Like just something that like I could almost start viewing my ADHD as like slightly separate to me or something. I could be like, oh, this is my ADHD talking, like, or this is my ADHD making this more challenging for me. And that's okay.
It wasn't like I'm broken. What's wrong with me? Like I'm trash. Why can't I keep up? It was, oh, of course I'm struggling a bit with this because my brain's built differently.
Exactly.
And now that's not to say that like every time you're like, no worries. Like it's all cool. I'm great now. Like it still can kind of suck and be super frustrating. But yes, to give that little bit of breathing room and like almost like that zoom out of like, okay, I'm struggling right now. And like, that's okay.
Yeah.
And I had that experience I was diagnosed a few months before I met my now partner, my person, the love of my life. And I went into that relationship so differently than any other relationship I've ever been in. Previous, I was like, hyper masked. And because my previous relationship to this one now had been so difficult and led to such a painful end, I was like, I'm never ever going to be in a relationship again where I don't bring my full self, because I now know from direct experience what hiding parts of me can do in a relationship. And I'd rather be single for the rest of my life than be in another situation like that. So I went in very intentionally talking about my ADHD from the beginning. Also because it was like kind of new for me, kind of this like shiny new thing. And I was like, well, I'm figuring it out. And, very lucky for me, my partner Lee is a very curious person, very supportive. And so he asks a lot of questions and it wasn't like a deal breaker for him. I'd also, done the work to build up a lot of awareness around it so that if and when things were happening, rather than the shame coming in of like, hey, why'd you leave these dishes in the sink? And being like, well, because of, and getting all defensive. It's like, oh, fuck, I forgot. Like that's something I do sometimes. I'm really sorry. I need to be more on top of it.
And actually, I noticed a massive shift in you. I could tell you reacted differently to things. Like it was like, and that you could poke a bit more fun at some of those things that you struggled with, because your previous reaction to any sort of comments around that would have been like immediate, like defense.
I was trying to hide all these things and like pretend like they weren't parts of my personality. It was so shameful. And especially being in our family and like, everyone was like, it was so type A. And I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm a type B person dressing up as a type A person. And I can't let even my closest loved ones know that like, actually I'm messy and I forget things and I don't really want it to be like all perfect and I'm late all the time and, so on and so forth. And once I did the work to release shame around that and be more compassionate about these parts of myself, I was then able, exactly like you said, and I do distinctly remember this myself too, to poke fun at it because it no longer was connected to me being an absolute failure of a human being. It was just like, of course I have these little quirks or whatever.
Right.
And now, don't get me wrong, being consistently late is rude. It is an ADHD thing. We have time blindness. It's tough to manage time. And also for me, transitions are really hard. Like getting up to shower, leaving the house, these things just like feel like you're asking me to climb Mount Everest sometimes when you're just asking me to get off the couch and get into the shower. And so I'll put them off, or I'll think that something's going to take me half an hour, that even though I know every single time I've done it in my life, it's taken me, an hour and a half.
Right.
And so there's definitely things like I'm not just like, oh, that's my ADHD, too bad, so sad. I have worked on it and I've put systems and routines and things in place that help me with that. But when those don't work, or the symptoms are extra loud, I can now be like, I'm not a piece of shit because I showed up late.
Right.
Kind of thing. Whereas before, the family may say something and I'd be, like you said, get so defensive. And I think that's been a huge part of it, because same thing now in the relationship with Lee, when he's like, well, why'd you do this? Or why'd you do that? And I mean, he does approach it with a beautiful, open curiosity, which helps. But I can be like, yeah, you're right. I need to like work on that. Or here's why.
Yeah. I have so many thoughts I want to share on this. Like, it's like, because you said earlier, like that, being late was a trait of ADHD. And it's like, it's not that. There's a bunch of other barriers that are happening.
Yes.
That lead to you being late.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And even time blindness. I'm like, I feel like and I'm directing this more towards you, because I actually feel like I have time blindness in the opposite way, where I give too much time. Like, because I was like so scared of being late, which is another thing of, it's like, I don't know, where did that come from? I'm like so fearful of being late, or was.
We went like two opposite directions.
Yeah, so I think yours was more of a like, you're late because there's a bunch of other things happening for you internally that prevent you from leaving on time. Like something as silly as like shoes that you can just slip on. Like
that will stop us from leaving the house.
That's why like I also think like going on a walk in the summer is easier for me, because it's like I don't have to put my jacket and my boots and all this stuff on.
Yeah.
Whereas like, and this I think sounds so ridiculous to people who aren't neurodivergent, I think, because they're just like, well, what do you mean? Like, just put your shoes on. And I'm like, no, there's like a block in my brain. Like,
but sort of going back to the relationship thing, because I just want to, this is so important to me, especially like seeing mom and dad, like now understanding that ADHD has been such a huge part of their relationship, because it is. You can't get away from that. Like in a relationship, when you are relying on both people coming to the table, and especially when kids are involved, and like being present and able to function and figure stuff out and manage the schedule and plan. If you have someone who is neurodivergent and struggles with executive functioning, then there is an obvious thing in the relationship that needs to be addressed and like systems created for. And the fact that I went into this relationship being so open, first and foremost for myself, not even realizing that openness would actually be such a benefit to my partner, because then he was like, oh, okay, this is a real thing, because I literally watch her do, like I see her every day and how she goes about routines and how she just can get absolutely hyper-focused into something where the whole rest of the world and time just like disappears, and she's in this thing, in this vortex. And he, very kindly will remind me, like, he says, okay, hey, what are you doing today? And like, do you need to be somewhere by a certain time? And if I do, then he'll be like, hey babe, it's 4 p.m. You have an hour till you need to be out of here. Or why don't you not sit down at your computer when we get back home from the gym and get in the shower, and then you can sit down at your computer. He reminds me to eat. Like, and these are all beautiful things, which I did struggle with at the start, because I was like, I am a 34-year-old woman. It's embarrassing that my partner's having to remind me to eat and, do time checks with me. But instead of what I would have done previously, which is like, just like put up this wall and been like, nope, I can handle it on my own. I don't need any help. I softened into that support, and it was game changing for me. Because now I have this person, on my team who helps me just in the way that, like, on any team, in any situation, different people bring different strengths to it. And you can kind of lean on each other for that. I have that now where I'm like, I don't have to exhaust myself by trying to do these things, because like he can kind of help in and he can step in, and help.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Like anyone out there who is dating and is neurodivergent and you are worried or fearful of bringing your whole self to a date because they're not going to like me, good. If they don't like you, then they are not the long-term partner that you need in life. If they are going to judge your neurodivergency without even understanding it or knowing who you are, I know that hurts in the moment, but it is long-term the best fucking thing that can happen, because to have that kind of support, and not just in romantic relationships, in friendships, with siblings, it's huge.
Yeah. I think there is something interesting, even if just like someone that you live with, even if they're not like helping you through those things, like I think there is something about someone else witnessing how you live.
Yeah.
Like kind of helps. Like it's like, because like didn't you, when you moved out by yourself, because like you lived by yourself for the first time
2 years ago,
and like you struggled a bit, right, with like how
overwhelming all the shit is.
Yes. Like how much you have to do for yourself. And I've thought about that a lot too, because like I have lived alone for a decent amount of time. Previously, when I had roommates, they'd be making dinner. So I'm like, oh, like it's dinner time. I should make dinner too. Like, and then I had this like accountability, because it was just like, okay, it's dinner time. And like, even though we all made different things, it was still like
a prompt.
Yes. Yeah, a reminder or something. Or like I'd see them going to the gym. So I'm like, oh, I got to get to the gym. Like just like little cues, I think, that again, to, you know, when working from home made me be like, okay, everything's crumbling. I think living by myself has also done that too. Like
it is very hard living on your own, working full time, cooking for yourself, cleaning, keeping up with social stuff, and having ADHD.
It's true. Like, and I mean, I even feel embarrassed saying, I'm like, I'm struggling to just do the normal things, like prepare meals. And I actually read something once when I was first uncovering like and learning about masking, is that like there's helpful masking and there's hurtful masking. Ooh. So it's like I was doing a lot of hurtful masking, and it's kind of good to remind yourself of the helpful masking, because like there are things that you do need in place to like keep you doing the normal things you need to do to get through your day. So things like to-do lists and calendar reminders, and I don't know, just like some like systems that you have in place to keep you on track. I remember it's like people would think it's like, oh, you're so good with birthdays. I'm like, no, it's just in my calendar.
With a reminder.
There's no way that I would just like wake up in that morning and be like, it's so-and-so's birthday. Like,
and I still forget sometimes with the reminder in my calendar.
And I remember like Dad would say that too. He'd be like, oh, I'm just so bad with birthdays. I was like, you just put it in your calendar and like put a reminder in there. Like that's the only way that I know it's someone's birthday. But then when it starts getting into hurtful is when you're like incessantly checking your to-do list out of fear of forgetting something on it, setting incessant reminders. Like I used to, this is crazy. Like I would like book a reservation and I would have like such fear around like either forgetting that I had it booked or forgetting like to cancel it if I needed to. So I would like book it in my calendar and I'd be like, okay, there's a 48-hour cancellation policy. So then I'm going to put a reminder in there. And then I still was like, that's not enough either. I'm going to put another one at the start of the week just in case. And that is not like that's hurtful.
It's like relearning as you start to unmask. You're relearning who you are at your core, the parts of you that were there because they did protect you for a long time that are no longer necessary, the parts of you that you want to present more to the world. But there's like that pendulum swing, right? Like when you first start unmasking, it's like it's probably going to swing overcorrect for a little bit.
Yeah.
You are going to be more intense. It's like when people really try to stop people pleasing, it's going to overcorrect and you're probably going to be a little bit intense and you're going to maybe over boundary and realize, okay, wait, this is actually not it either. And then you kind of come back to the middle. And I think it's okay. at the beginning to let that pendulum swing the other
Yeah.
way. Let it out.
Yeah.
Let it be big and messy and confusing, and like you don't fully have a grasp on what's happening, but that like, you know, it's got to come out, and then you can then kind of find that balance again. Like you said, the hurtful versus helpful like it's like, what needs to be paid attention to, what parts of your inner child, your inner teenager need a whole lot of love and need to go a little bit bananas for a bit before you then go, okay, I'm going to rein that in and like find the, you know, the middle ground.
I completely agree with that. And I felt like that too. It was almost like I just like started rejecting like everything that I felt I was doing to like mask or whatever. I think my body also, again, like it was all happening at a time where like my body shut down. So I actually didn't even have a choice but to not do those things.
Yeah.
Like it was like I had to fully let go of like trying to uphold those parts of me. But, you know, I do feel now that I'm at a point where I'm a bit like, okay, I'm kind of ready to start entertaining which things that I want to like let come back or something. Or, you know, like that I don't have to have like said goodbye to forever.
Yeah, it's like almost you're sort of like rehabbing in a way. Like if it was like if you know, broke your leg or something, that it's like at the beginning you have to like completely like immobilize it and like, I don't know, I've never personally broken my leg, but like it's a lot of rest and
either of us have broken any limbs.
No, oh my God, knock on wood. Next episode. But there's a lot of rest. You have to immobilize it. It's in a cast. Like you really have to like tend to it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you're able maybe to do some like physical rehabilitation and start moving it and start doing that. And then eventually you're going to, you know, the cast comes off and you're going to start, you know, maybe you have a boot and then you walk. And it's like, just know that at the beginning, you know, it's going to feel raw and rough and the exhaustion is so fucking real, but you are not going to be in that space forever. It feels like at the time, especially because it's like your world has been flipped upside down and you're like, oh my God, is this how I am now forever? It's not.
Yeah.
It will change. You will find a new normal, a new semblance of balance, and it is so worth it. Like we've talked a lot about how hard it's been and how confusing it's been. But like for me, it's been this like beautiful remembering and softening and compassionate coming back to myself. And it has deepened my relationships with you, with our family, with my partner Lee, with friends. And it wasn't this whole like thing when, you know, I told my friends I had ADHD. I'm sure some of them were like, yeah, that makes a fuckload of sense. But it wasn't this like major reckoning. It was just kind of like, okay, cool. Maybe that explains a couple things. Let's keep going. And you know, it's made my relationship with work so different in how I work, the pace at which I work, the structure of my day, all of that like my life is so much richer, I will say, for sure.
Yeah. And like, and I agree with that. Like, as in there are so many, it's such a like beautiful journey of just rediscovering parts of yourself and whatnot. Like, I do feel like I'm still, it's like I'm getting there. I still have like some friction. I think if I look at the past, like, you know, year and a half or whatever it's been since I've been diagnosed, like when I look at my personal life, I feel really good about the things I've changed or like the things that I've allowed myself to just be in my personal life. And like even, you know, gotten over the fear of like, well, if I'm not the planner, if I'm not this, like, am I still going to bring enough value to my friends or all that sort of stuff? Like, I'm like, that has been such an incredible journey because it's like, I can really see and feel the benefit that I've had in that realm. Yeah. Right. Like, it's like, and I'm excited to like continue to lean into who I feel like I really am in that regard. I think I still like am very, very, very challenged on sort of the work side of things.
Yes.
You like you have to mask to such a heavy degree at work, even more so in just like your normal day to day personal life, that like that's the part that's like still very challenging. Because I think once you start going through the process of unmasking, to have to still try to do that in a work setting is like even more like, I can't do this.
Well,
like
I feel like the bullshit detector just like it just becomes so much more sensitive.
Yeah.
And once you see, you can't unsee.
No.
And so totally agree. Like having to then mask up at work feels like viscerally just like something everything your being wants to reject, but you don't always have an option. I find especially work, like school also speaks to this, but especially work, it's a structure that is not built to nurture neurodivergence, but it very much benefits from neurodivergent minds and brains and the way that they think about things so differently, and they can be creative and compassionate and all of that. But like, then we are absolutely burning out our neurodivergent people by asking them to do all those things, but exist in a system that is not built for them.
So I actually have a great example of this because I was talking to a friend of mine recently who she's known that she had ADHD since she was in school. And when she was in elementary school and even all through high school, like there were accommodations for her. Like she, was able to go and do her work in another room with less distraction and all these things. So there were accommodations made for her in school. Then she was saying, she's like, but then I get into the real world, into work, and she's like, there's no accommodations for me. I was so fascinated by that because I was just like, wait, that's like kind of huge. Like, you were taught that you could have these accommodations, like to help your brain. And then as soon as you enter the real world, there's all of a sudden just like every man for themselves. And actually it's like,
you don't need those anymore.
Well, no, and to the point that it's actually rejected. Like if you ask for those things, especially pre-pandemic, to like have more time at home or like not, like whatever, not come into the office, this is that, it's rejected. Like, and that's like huge to me. That like comparison, I was just like, wait, that makes no sense.
None.
Like,
well, it boils my blood that, companies don't recognize how much they benefit from their neurodivergent people and that they are like hurting them.
Yeah.
It just, it like make it make sense. And on that note, actually, about like your friend being diagnosed, when she was a kid.
Yeah.
Looking back, do you wish that you had been diagnosed earlier?
Oh, that's a hard question. I don't think I would want to have known. I don't think like it wasn't understood back when we were younger too. Like if I eventually have children, like I hope that because as we are like, there's so much more information now and it's going to get better, that I'm like, okay, like I would probably want, if my kid had ADHD, I want them to know probably from an earlier age, because we have the tools and understanding to deal with it differently. I don't think I would have wanted to know back then, but I maybe wouldn't have hurt to like know a little bit earlier, like in my adult life. But
it's so hard to say because you only have your own experience and where you've come to. And like, similarly, I feel quite strongly that I wouldn't have wanted to be diagnosed as a kid because I think it would have, exactly like you said, there was an understanding back then that would have put me in a category that would be different. And I think that we've talked about, our family kind of naturally put systems in place that, while they were, created some tough expectations, they worked.
Yes.
They allowed us to be very independent and very successful. And I wouldn't change my last 5 years of experience for anything because it's made me who I am today. And I love that version of me. I'm so grateful for it. So getting diagnosed early could have changed that. Do I wish some of the pain or the like confusion or trying to even like get to know who I actually am was made a bit easier? I don't know, maybe, but Yeah, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it.
Yeah. And I think also, I think this applies to both of us. Like, I wasn't, but again, when I look at myself even 5 years ago, like I wasn't ready to know this then.
True.
Like I found out at the point that I was like ready to find out and ready to like,
Dive in.
I think like it happened at the time it needed to. Like it is like, it's tough when you are like, yeah, I got diagnosed in my 30s. Like that's like, wow, that's 30 years of trying to understand what the hell happened.
Well, take dad diagnosed in his 60s. That's a mind fuck. Because like I feel like for us too, like, okay, we get to now shift things in work, in relationship,
in potential family
dynamics,
like planning, like that sort of stuff. Like it's like, I'm so glad I know this now.
Yes.
Like
I wouldn't have wanted to know later. Maybe not earlier, but certainly not later.
But even just the fact that like, neither of us have children like yet. I'm so grateful that I have found this out, that if I do end up having children, that I'm just like, I can picture what would have happened if I didn't know about this and I had kids, that it would have blown my life up, like, which is so common for a lot of women.
Yes. Yep.
It's like as soon as they have kids, all of a sudden, like they're not responsible for just themselves anymore, and it just gets so
Everything's
completely overwhelming, and overstimulating and all that. So I am like really glad that I know now and that it happened now before I get into that stage. Like
I agree, because I just have such a different lens of how I'm want to go into being a mother, but also parenting a child who may, because of the genetic link, and the genetics are strong in our family, could have neurodivergency, and how I can create systems to gently accommodate and support that without it becoming their whole identity.
Well, and also for you can go into it knowing like that it is probably going to be even more challenging than like raising children already is. That it's like, again, to like continue to give yourself grace.
That's such a good point. And Lee's asked me this, right? Like one of the conversations, we talked very early on about having kids, and he's almost a decade older than me and I'm in my late 30s. So like, it was sort of, let's go, we're either in or we're out. So we did talk about ADHD and how that would impact me as a mother. And there was some, things that I really had to like look at myself and reckon with. And while I think I am going to be a great mother, I do truly believe that, I cannot take the guilt of not matching up to the like archetype of motherhood into my future family, because it will destroy us all. So that learning of leaning on Lee then needs to extend of leaning on my community when I have kids.
To already be giving yourself grace on that then will continue to give yourself grace as you head into that period. Like it's just, I think that's just like so valuable. Like
and I'm hoping I can keep it. Please remind me when I'm losing my mind and feeling all sorts of guilt that I said this. Well, I feel like we covered a lot here.
Yeah.
And there's so much more to cover. I think we will do another, maybe if you'll come back, we'll do another episode on ADHD specifically at work.
Yeah.
We can even talk more about relationships as well, dating, which is a whole frickin' thing. But yeah, I'm just like, thank you for being here and having this chat with me and sharing your experience of unmasking. I hope that those listening, something, resonated for you personally, and if not, for someone in your life.
Yeah.
For you to be able to soften a bit to their experience and maybe let someone know, like, I see you and all parts of you are welcome and beautiful here.
Yeah.
Because whether you're neurodivergent or not, the physical softening that happens in your body when you hear someone say that is... it's so good.
Yeah, I totally agree.
All right, cuties. Well, until next time.
Thanks so much.